Way. Oh, we're live.
Oh, behave yourself.
That's right. The Around the Lens way.
Yes, exactly. We're live. Screw it. We'll do it live.
Hello and welcome to Around the Lens, your live weekly visual journalism roundtable show coming at you every Monday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. I am your host, David J. Murphy. With me, as always, are my co-hosts, Ron Hamilton.
Aloha.
Aloha, Ron. How is everything in Hawaii?
Sunny and warm, sir. Everything's wonderful.
Great.
Daylight saving time problems all sorted out, and I'm back on the show.
Awesome. Glad to have you. On my other co-host, on the other side, weighing in at, well, let's not give that away, Mr. Zach D. Roberts.
Hello. How goes it?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm alive.
That's one, and that's a win right there. That's anything new?
Depending on how you look at it. I made I made another list. I made the white supremacists, all of the famous
the top 100
top
white
100
supremacist photos.
The white supremacists built a list of all the supposed Antifa that were in Charlottesville, and your co-host here, was number 79 on a completely non-weighted scale. It's just in the order of that they discovered people. So never mind, I am not a member of Antifa. Never mind the fact that Antifa is not an actual organization with members, so there are no members. And never mind, I was a journalist.
Yeah,
I got my card right here.
But okay, cool. I'll take it.
All right. Awesome. And of course, our guest this week, the one, the only, from CameraOdysseys.com, Mr. Bruce Byers. Hello, Bruce.
How you doing?
Good, buddy. For those of us who weren't here for episode 105, I think it was, your first appearance, who are you and what do you do?
I'm a photographer out of New York, actually born in Reno, so take a little bit of West Coast with me, and got some great stuff going on here in New York. Camera Odysseys is going gangbusters, trying to get to Bhutan and Nepal in the fall, and heading back to Cuba. We're showing you a little bit of Cuban rum here.
Nice.
Don't tell anybody. And so we're doing a lot of good stuff here. We got some magazine I just produced. I'm showing at SVA here in New York. If anybody's here in SVA, big thing next week. And I got a show in Pennsylvania. So we're doing a lot of stuff.
Awesome. Glad to hear it. Glad things know things are going well for you. I actually received a book from you. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Wow.
Very nice to get a book from a fellow photographer. A lot of great photos in there. A lot of your street work. Tell the people the name of that book so they can go out and buy it themselves.
It's called Street Moments, and my site, can't believe that I ever got the site, but it's streetmoments.com.
Wow.
And it's exactly what I've been shooting for the last 45 years, and so I put a book together, and it's just on New York street moments, but you can check it out at streetmoments.com, and I'll send you off one.
Awesome. I just realized that we are live on my personal Facebook page and not live on the Around the Lens Facebook page. So, all right then. That's great.
We'll just share that over.
Well, let me change it to a public post so at least I can get it posted onto the just so you know, behind the scenes, this is
live media.
This is so live. Anyways, what the hell is that sound?
It's not an airplane anymore.
I think it's Ron laughing. Or possibly it's that weird doll that he has nearby him. I don't know.
Oh my God.
This is my doll. They're back in the picture here. There we go.
That is
okay. This is not 4chan's secret black pages. So
Back to bed, Kippy.
That was the weirdest laugh. Ron, I'm so glad to have had the opportunity to hear what your laugh sounds like. That's a laugh right there. That's gonna go down in history. That's gonna haunt me in my dreams tonight. Let me just tell you that right now. Anyways,
it'll be coming out of that doll's mouth.
Exactly.
Anyways, I've shared the live stream on our Around the Lens page, and so hopefully you can share it now, Bruce, with your audience if they would like to see it. It's public. So, anyways, let's get on with the show. Bruce, you taught. What's that?
Should I warn them now?
No. Everything's good now, except for Ron. Ron might laugh again. Who knows? Get us in trouble with the FCC or something.
Wait.
Oh no!
Oh, here.
Oh Jesus! Oh jeez!
No, that did it. My fault. There you go.
It's okay.
Bruce.
Trust me, this is par for the course for our show. I'd be surprised if something didn't go wrong. Anyways, Bruce, what have you been up to, man? You went to Cuba, right?
Yeah, we spent a lot of time in Cuba this February, and had two really great trips down there. We started in Santiago. Did not go to Guantanamo Bay, thank you, but we Santiago and then into Vinales, where the tobacco was being picked, and did some really great stuff there, and then went into Havana. So I go there many times. Camera Odysseys is the company that takes us, and it's really great. Wonderful time.
Great.
And it's a very good rom, too.
Excellent. Glad to hear it. All right, great. Well, yeah, check out CameraOdysseys.com. That's what Bruce's page. We got a lot of stuff to talk about tonight, and I want to first bring up this topic. We got an email question from someone who's watching right now, Mr. Jimmy Matt Gates. Hello, Jimmy. Glad to have you watching us. Jimmy sent us an email that I thought was kind of interesting and could open our show. We don't get a lot of viewer requests for emails or viewer questions, but I thought Jimmy Gates here had a pretty good one, so I thought it was something we could start our conversation with, and also kind of goes right in line with what Zach does and stuff like that. So Jim asked, basically he was covering the March for Our Lives in Dallas, and he was shooting some photos and wanted to make sure they were, following the NPPA Code of Ethics guidelines and everything like that. And basically he asked, when you pose people for a camera, like they're holding signs, right, and you want to get a really good shot of their sign and them, what do you have to do to essentially ensure that that image, how do you defend the journalistic integrity of that image? How do you present that image in a journalistic way to make sure you're following a line with the NPPA guidelines? So I responded to him with my answer, which I will hold on to until after you all have the opportunity to answer. So I'm going to throw it over to Zach first. Zach, how would you answer Jimmy's question?
Well, I mean, for me, it's covering protests is kind of my beat. So it's tough because a lot of times if the purpose of what you're photographing is to capture the signs, which is kind of a big thing that you want, that does really well for photo stories and things like that. So a lot of news sites will actually run just photo galleries of people's signs from protests because people get really creative. So for me, I'm very open to just asking them to just stop what they're doing, stop one moment, and take the shot. I usually try desperately not to pose them at all. Usually most people will correct themselves if they're covering part of the sign. The only thing I'll do is, if it's upside down, I'll be like, just point that out because I know they don't purposely want that. So, I'll point that sort of thing out. But everything I do is on the fly in the world of photojournalism. I try not. I don't use flashes. I don't put them in a studio setup or pull them aside or anything like that, or even usually try to change them around too much unless either they're completely silhouetted or they're completely and totally blinded by blown out by the light. So other than that, I usually try to capture them within the setting that they are in and take that photo, and then I just move on. Sometimes what people do, since I unless I'm working for someone really in particular, I'm usually freelancing and working for myself. So what I do also is if somebody asks me like, oh, would you mind taking another photo with my kids or something like that, I'll take a photo and give them my card, and I'm happy to send them a photo themselves. But I've started. I used to not really do that too much, and now I've started just not caring too much because I don't think it defeats any journalistic ethics or anything like that to do it. The only things that I say would be outside of like say standard like NPPA guidelines or any of the other usual like journalistic guidelines is again if you take them out of the setting that they're in and tell them. I don't think telling them to just stop like and not even pose. People will do that naturally anyway, but just to say, I usually, especially like March for Lives, you can go to my Instagram page, ZD Roberts. I've posted a bunch of photos from there, or go over to visu.news and I post a whole gallery of like actually just signed photos. And either what I try to do is I try to shoot as much as possible with either a telephoto or just work my way around so they're not reacting to my camera, but sometimes it's just not possible. Or in particular, if it's a kid, like at March for Our Lives, there was a ton of children, and I don't know where it fits into the guidelines at all, but my personal process lately has been, especially at things like March for Our Lives or Black Lives Matter, Ferguson, things like that, especially the protest against white supremacists that I've covered. I ask about kids first because there's a really good chance of those kids getting doxxed, those kids going on. If my photos go viral, then it means that that photo is going to go on websites like Stormfront or, pro-gun, crazy, completely lunatic, like, pro-gun websites that make fun of make fun of people and things like that. I've seen a bunch of photography, thankfully none of my own, have that happen just with the March for Our Lives protests. So I always ask verbal permission or at least get a head nod from a parent before I take a photo of a kid. But like that's... Again, with kind of everything with photojournalism, there's a lot of like you have to build your own personal ethics, and I mean obviously NPPAs are really good guidelines, but build your own personal ethics and also kind of the moment is what really matters a lot. Like again, like I bend rules that I normally wouldn't do if it's a kid, because I have to stop them. I have to ask their parent for permission, have to kind of get some rapport with the child so that they're either not crying or like looking away or something like that, and then take their photo. And usually what I do is I take a lot of photos in a short amount of time and take the one that looks the most candid. But that's my short guide personally.
Yeah, photographing kids, I've always kind of... It's a touchy thing because you can't necessarily photograph them reacting to you and smiling and laughing at you and have that be still, an authentic, in my opinion, image. It's like, because again, you're influencing the scene, right? Yeah. So, kids are definitely, you have to be careful with around the kids. Ron or Bruce, do either of you have any opinions on this matter?
Well, I think that we've got really big protests here in New York. I mean,
what? Really?
Women?
No way.
Not according to Trump, but 900,000 people on the streets in New York 1 minute, and then nobody the next minute. Just amazing where they disappeared to.
Yeah.
The people are out there to be seen. They're out there expecting photographers to take their picture. They're out there for the newscast. And unfortunately, with the children have, depending on how young they are, have no idea why they're out there. Mom just took them out there. And so mom and dad are bringing them out to make a statement. Therefore, I think, and nothing against the little kid, but they're free game. It's a moment in history that we're photographing. Yes, it's unfortunate that it goes off onto these other sites. That's journalism is gone. Unfortunately, now we have to protect ourselves against the evil part of the internet. Whereas that means we don't get to cover journalism correctly anymore.
Yeah.
So, and I think putting up a backdrop and having people come to that backdrop is all part of journalism. Until it's used in a commercial venue, it's news, it's history, you're on the streets. Otherwise, we're going to have a very sterile imagery of the best part of that march, and that's not going to get. It's going to get boring. Really, nobody's going to want to shoot it anymore. So nobody's going to want to look at it.
Yeah. I will add quickly, actually interviewed, at least down in D.C., I interviewed a bunch of the kids because this is something I've been curious because I've been covering protests since the Bush administration, and kids are always out there. The kids at the March for Our Lives process, every single one of them, they at least had something to say that at least in my eye, wasn't messaged from their parents, because you can always kind of tell when a parent has kind of fed them, like, here's something to say. Like, it was purely like from their view on the issue, and I was actually happily surprised. And I think probably the wall-to-wall news coverage that these protests and the idea that kids are actually like standing up and protesting against the NRA and for gun legislation probably has kind of fed into that really well. But I was actually, for this is one of the first ones for like kids when you're like down to like 7 years old, and they're out there, like they actually had like at least an idea of why they were there, which is something new.
Yeah, but I think though that the mother doesn't care as much for the 7-year-old. I think it's the 3-year-old that's in her arm that, leave my kid alone. Whereas the 7-year-old is beating mom up to get out there and start yelling and screaming. So so you got two there. Both in the same photo. What are you going to do?
Yeah. Back to the original James's question about the posing of protesters, or in fact anybody. We saw that 6 months ago with CNN. They were trying to get some protesters signs, whatever, and the police said, okay, you can get a shot over here. They opened the cordon off to let the protesters come in so they get a shot by CNN. And people were saying fake news, staged fake news. And it's the same thing. The idea is to get the shot. You need the shot. You need to get it somehow. And if that's the chance you get, that's all you're going to get. Go for it. That's my opinion. For my own news organization, of course they tell us don't pose things. But when you pull your camera out, the first thing people do is huddle up in front of you and make a nice little picture for you. It's like what Zach was saying. The people do it naturally. Mm-hmm. So just our very presence there influences the event. It's not unless you're there, you're not getting the real story. I mean, we get as accurate as we can, but it's not. We are influencing things by our being there.
This is actually why I use more than I
telephoto.
Used before. I use telephoto almost more than feel like my best shots personally. I think from and not even because of the bokeh and the compress, like how a good telephoto shot looks, if you're like photographing just a person or a sign or something like that, but just in general because the candid nature of it. I think most of I've actually started I carry 2 cameras, and for the most part, I've been just carrying my 35mm 1.4 and my 70-200, and then I have like my 24-105 or. Oh my God, I'm blanking. 24-125, I think is the thing. 130. No, I have a Nikon, the 4, but I just carry those 2 on the camera, and I very rarely switch anymore. And I think I get my best work when I do that, as opposed to like carrying the 24 or even my 17-35, which is what I used to shoot most protests with because of just. When you have 800,000 people or whatever in a confined area, sometimes you have to photograph wide. So,
well, go ahead,
Bruce. No, sorry, Bruce. Go ahead. You're our guest.
If you take a look at the Street Moment book, that's all done with 35mm, and none of them know that I'm doing it, and I'm standing right in front of them. Yeah. So it's a lot of the times you don't have to pose. as long as you become part of the group, and then you can move around that, I'm sure you do, Zach, move around that crowd and get the shots without having to pose them.
Yeah.
And posing is great. It's a great portrait situation. It's wonderful. It can be a nice series if you're doing it for that. But you can do the same thing by just becoming part of the crowd and just shooting that way.
Yeah.
I've also, actually good you said that, because I was going to take about my 70 to 200. I've used my 70 to 200 before, and I can see people can spot that big old thing, and they know I'm taking a picture of them. So I guess Zach is sneakier than I am, but I've often said I wish this thing was invisible, and not for bad reasons, so I can get some legitimate shots that look like not posed.
I'll say for candid stuff, to get that nature, I've never been a street photographer. Just because I'm very awkward about like taking photos of people without them knowing, like in things that has nothing to do with anything, but just the D750 is the first camera that I've had that has an articulated LCD screen. That has changed the way I do photography so much, down to like the point where it's like it almost used to be like when you have a seagull or something like that and you're looking down, because either you can hold it up over your head and look up, and you're shooting at such a distance that people just can't see you. I mean, like at March for Our Lives, it was a completely different protest than most protests that I covered, because A, it wasn't moving, and B, it physically was difficult to get through the crowd. The reason I didn't get to the front of the stage was because I physically could not get there. It would have taken me 3 hours to just work my way through the crowd there. It was so packed. But with that type of, the lens move, I can shoot at a distance, or even with my 35 millimeter, I can shoot really close up and not even be looking at the person, but see it on my LCD. And it's really changed the way that I do. I've turned into almost even more of a street photographer doing photojournalism than I've ever been. Even when I did the few times I've done street photography, it's always been like kind of blind with a 35 or a 50 or whatever I was shooting with, whatever I had at the time, and kind of shooting, like having a vague idea of where the angle at which you're going at. But now with the LCD, that to me has really changed kind of everything in the way that I shoot. And I see a lot of my colleagues do the same thing now. They're shooting a lot more out of their LCD, they're in the back than even holding it up to their eye as much, just because you get that kind of, you're not really taking a photo, and you're able to get that candid moment, because everyone now is basically always posing for photos, whether it be, my thing that I've even started doing to get even vaguely, like almost candid, is if somebody's taking a photo with their cell phone, I'll get up behind them and take a photo of them taking the photo, so it's not me posing them. Right. That's my now go-to shot for things if I want to get a group of people that are together, because people won't let you take photos a lot of times individually. I literally have to tell people, they'll immediately group together, and I'll be like, no, I'll take a group photo, but I want to take individuals of every one of you because you all have great signs or you have whatever. And then it ends up being exactly what I don't like doing, which is, again, you're kind of posing them in a way, other than just, you're basically separating them. But anyway.
I'll agree with definitely what you said, and also what Bruce said about, you can make a nice portrait series out of something like that. I've seen tons of great sign shots from protests, especially the clever or funny signs. And it kind of goes to how I answered Jimmy when I responded to his email, and what basically said, yeah, you can pose people with signs to get a better shot, sure, but, you got to follow a couple rules. First off, if it's a pose shot, you really have to make sure that is, expressly shown as a pose shot, like the person is looking at the camera, they're holding the sign. And then if you enter that photo into a contest or something, you would probably want to enter that more in the portrait category or portrait news category than straight news. And if you're posing someone, you definitely don't want to pose them in something like, okay, hold the sign up and really scream your brains out, you're really mad. That's true photo manipulation right there. But if it's a portrait and it's obviously a portrait, then you're fine there. And also, I would say, to add on to that, is to put, any information about that in the caption. State explicitly in the caption that person is posing for that photo. So there's absolutely no possibility of confusion. In the very, very few times I've manipulated an image for artistic purposes, I have made it explicitly clear that this has been done for artistic purposes, and it's never anything designed to confuse anyone. And if anyone is saying it is, then they didn't read right below the text. There is a category called photo illustration, but that's, again, you have to be careful there, and make sure that you're very explicit. So that's pretty much that's kind of, but in the end, it's you as the photojournalist. You have free reign of movement. What kind of shots do you want to take from a protest? Do you want to take a bunch of posed portrait shots, or do you want to try and move yourself into a position to get a great shot that shows off the sign and is also authentic and real and shows a protester doing what a protester does? And I would think that would be the point. That would be the reason you're there in the first place. If you just want to get people holding signs, okay, that's great. That's one thing you can do. But really challenge yourself to shoot the protest live and natural. And that's kind of how I would tell Jimmy to handle any protests in the future, from my opinion. So, kind of reiterating some of the same points you guys are saying, but that's how I answered the question. Anything else? Anybody want to say anything else before we move on to the next topic?
I would add double emphasis. I should have added as well that if the times that you do stop somebody and they're looking at the camera in the way that it looks like they're posed, if I send something to my wire or whoever else and I have a caption on it, I'll say they stop to pose for a photo or something. You add some sort of context to it so that it's not them just naturally doing it. So you're not even trying to fake it, even though it's really obvious usually. But so you're not trying to fake something. And that's so easy to super easy to do. And you see that on almost on any level of photojournalists' captions if you read it, which is again always a really good idea. Is go to Reuters, go to Corbis, go to all these different sites, and actually, if you look at like photos from the same event you covered, read what their captions are. And kind of what info put there. It's always a really good idea if you haven't formally learned how to write captions, say like me. I've never taken a journalism class in my life. I recommend doing that because you'll be able to, at least if you have to submit to someone other than your Facebook page or your Twitter or something like that, you'll know what to do properly. So,
okay. All right. Our next topic is an unfortunate one. We always hear about this ever since the Me Too movement. This has become the sort of reoccurring theme here is, again, people getting called out for sexual assault, sexual harassment, and whatnot. We talked about another photographer. I won't remember his name off the top of my head a little while back. And now we got another one. Nicholas Nixon. He was a provocative professor of photography over at the Massachusetts College of Art and Design. He was instructing his students to photograph people they'd like to sleep with, photographing intimate body parts of the anatomy, showing off his anatomy to his students, posing his students nude in his office, making passes at them. I mean, really, this guy has a pretty long list of things that he's done, and in all these cases, like, what? This is going on for how long? So it's kind of crazy, but again, another sort of again, I'm going to say allegedly. I don't want to get myself in trouble here. I'm going to say allegedly all this stuff happened, just so I'm kind of covered there. But what do you guys think of this? I mean, where are we at on why are we having another person, using their allegedly using their position of power and taking advantage and just, I don't know what the sort of lure is of showing, with all these guys, it seems like they have to show their anatomy, to women. That's like, I don't know what their thing, it's like with Harvey Weinstein and the comedian, I can't remember his name off the top of my head,
Louis C.K.
I don't know what this is, What do you guys think of this? Where are we at? What's going on here? What's going on in Massachusetts? My where I was born.
Do you want me to go on my tangent first, or do you want to wait for people? Talk about these social justice kind of issues. I'd be like, do we want to have me go first, or should we wait for other people?
Well, let's open up to Bruce and Zach first, or Bruce and Ron before we throw it onto the Zach train. Bruce, you got any thoughts on Mr. Nixon?
Well, I think that my parents didn't know much about my photography classes in school and college and everything else, and we all experimented in taking photographs of everything that we did, but I never had teachers participate in my experimenting and what I was photographing. I think that it's kind of the sick end of it. It's not the photographer part that's bad. It's what the guy is doing to satisfy himself. He's picked photography because I can fake like we're going to do a nude shoot here today. Well, okay, Susie and Johnny, and now he can use that as that's not photography. That's not the fault of photography, unfortunately, and therefore it gives us photographers who have never done it and never would do it and would be disgusted by someone doing it a really bad name.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what he was saying is there are a subset of men in general who, let's say like this. There is a sex drive. All men have sex drive. All women have sex drive to varying degrees. Some men, if they're not able to express that in a natural, safe, consensual way, I think they're going to find a way to express that. And if, like Bruce was saying, oh gosh, I've got a camera and I can pretend I'm going to take a nude shoot here, but the actual end game is sexual gratification. That's the method he's going to use. If this guy was a plumber and he taught plumbing, and allegedly, if he was teaching plumbing, and he would say, and stay after class, I'm going to show you how to clean the pipes, something like that. Whatever it is, I think he's going to find a way to express that. Doesn't have to be photography related.
Or if he was like a pizza delivery man, and
would you like anchovies? Exactly.
Or if he was a pool cleaner,
exactly.
You really got to take the net on the stick and like clean the scum off the top of the pool, right? I mean, that's.
I'm sorry, Dave. Have you ever seen one of those pornos? Like, clearly you haven't. That's not how it starts. Yeah. Okay, it's like the girl's baby.
That's how they all started. How did they start, Zach?
Oh God!
I have to explain to you this too.
Well, you see, when a man and a woman want pizza,
very, very much,
very, very much. All right, quick, Zach, save us with a tangent, please.
So
get us out of here.
Cue the social justice warrior right now. So first off, this is about power, as with all of these scenarios are. It's not a sex drive thing. It's not whatever. This guy can go get laid if he wants to. He's a relatively, in his world, a famous known person. I'm sure he can go on, Tinder or whatever else and find his fix. But this is about power. This is a guy also, we should know, even though we have to say alleged, also we have emails of him making unbelievably uncouth statements that if they were said to your 18-year-old daughter, you'd punch the guy in the face. That if they, and also if this guy wasn't likely tenured, this wouldn't even be a conversation we're having. So not that I'm not against tenure, mind you. I'm just saying like this is one of the reasons why this is gotten so far. Because again, one of the problems is that women have gone to administration, has gone to whatever, and colleges have done nothing to do with it afterwards because this is a guy who they like to have and he's a powerful person and whatever. That happens at big schools, it happens at small schools, wherever. The thing is, I went to a super small edgy art school, SUNY Purchase Film School, where the crap that we watched, that some of which actually included also the professor being nude at some point, was in no shape and form. Which now thanks for this, because thanks for this episode. Now I'm having flashbacks to seeing that professor's nude body. But it was done tastefully. He warned you. He said, "Hey, if you don't wanna do this, step out. It's fine. It's not a thing." Right. It was within the context of other, art films that you could do yourself. It wasn't in the realm of, half of my class, it was a class of 22 students. Half of my class I think at least half of them were female. It was actually I think it was only 5 guys in this class. Yeah. And it was never done tastefully. I wish it wasn't done at all, because I thought the films were shit and whatever. But and I also saw Steve Buscemi in his first acting role in a lobster costume, which this professor filmed. So lots of weird things, but it's how you present it and how you back it up and how you talk about it. You can show Sally Mann's work. You should be able to show Sally Mann's work in class, even though it has child nudity in it, because it's well-respected art and you can discuss about it and you can have conversations about it. Based on everything I've read about Nixon, is that he was incapable of having that professor-level conversation or even student-teacher level conversation with that. And the idea that, yes, you can have students work with you on personal projects all the time, that's not a weird thing to happen, especially in art schools or whatever, where, their professors are usually doing their own personal work and need unpaid labor basically to help out. That's not weird. But the idea that this guy had no ability to stop himself and go and step back and go, wait a minute, this is weird and this is bad. And this is potentially not only illegal, but also against hopefully every rule that is within the Massachusetts College of Art and Design rule book. And again, the problem at the end of the day ends up being is that it's about power, and the fact that this guy knew that he had the power and the connections within the school to not get fired and not get in trouble from this. Because he never did, he never, at least as far as we know, never, actually did things that were illegal in the state of Massachusetts. But he did things that were, I would at least hope, I haven't read the Mass Arts student or, college handbook, but I would assume that almost every single thing in this article, at least from the Boston Globe, would be against it. I know it would have been against every at SU when I was there in the art department there, at SUNY Purchase and SUNY Oswego. It would have been against those. And it's unbelievable that he is still that it lasted this long, that he was able to get away with it that long. And that has so much to do with administration. I've seen this before. Friends of mine have had problems with professors, and administration at these schools hate to do anything against a professor for whatever reason, even if there's proof. And it seems as we have here, we have text, I think it's text messages and emails, things like that I would believe step right across the line of anything a professor should ever send to a student. And if they were in a personal relationship, then I would also believe that would also usually step across normal collegiate lines, that you can't have a relationship with your student. But yeah, so that's my rant.
All right, good rant. Yeah, again, it's something that hopefully we'll find out soon how this goes out. He was abruptly retired from the Boston Institute of Contemporary Art. His work was abruptly retired from the art on March 22nd. So obviously, much like many others in his sort of category, people are taking notice. People are responding. So it'll be interesting to see how this all pans out. And once it does, we'll probably talk about it.
I can also add, because I forgot about this part. The fact that he is I know his work really well, and I think probably most people do, is that he's the photographer who photographed the Brown sisters, the annual portraits, as the Boston Globe explains, annual portraits he shot of his wife and sisters over the last 4 decades. I've seen these photos a million times. They're amazing. I think I used to own a book of them. And so it's not all Terry Richardson. Like, this is that. I think that was the guy you were talking about earlier, Terry Richardson,
yes. Mm-hmm.
Vice photographer, shoots models. Usually, basically every single model that's ever worked with him has some story of him sexually harassing or potentially also raping them. And this guy gets away with it. But you can look at his work and go kind of, well, yeah. But like you look at Nixon's work, at least I would believe his most known work, this annual portraits he shot with the Brown sisters, and go, there's no way in my world that I would have ever thought that he'd be that type of guy. Sure. And so it's also a good message to go. It's also just the guy that probably, photographs, college portraits and stuff like that and doesn't do anything. It's not always just the edgy Vice photographer, that, well, no crap, he's doing that. What do you think the woman we're walking into when they, that sort of thing. So
yeah, it's kind of like you wouldn't expect it from the surface, but obviously when you dig deeper, you find the bad stuff. So well, interesting to see how this pans out. The next story I want to talk about tonight is about our buddy Andy Grimm. This was a gentleman, in case you don't remember, he was coming onto the scene of a crime. As far as I know, he was pulling out his tripod, and the sheriff on duty thought he had a gun, and so he shot him. And of course, when this story broke, we were all like, "Oh gosh, you see this? Man, us photographers can't get a break. These police, they sure are trigger happy." Well, it turns out in some additional reports that apparently Andy was warned about his activity on other scenes, coming onto the scene and basically sort of running up onto officers and not giving them warning, causing them to essentially unholster their weapon. So what do you guys think? Does this, I'll throw it to you, Ron, because you threw me about this story, but I mean, you're still on Andy's side. What do you think about this?
Whenever I see a problem with any situation, and the photographer is blamed for something, I take photography out of it and say, okay, what if it was somebody else in that scenario? Not carrying a camera, but carrying, let's say it was a plumber, carrying a load of pipes, and there's a cop doing something, and the plumber says, oh, I better hurry to my truck with all my pipes and put them away before that cop backs out or whatever it causes. Something's going on. I better get over. And the cop shoots the plumber. And then he says, oh, I've told you before, don't run around carrying those pipes. They look like guns. Once again, I don't care. If you're a police officer, you're trained for certain situations, and or you should be, and you shouldn't shoot people unless they deserve it. Okay. That's my opinion. Thank you, sir. That's my opinion.
And that's the way it is with Ron Hamilton.
I'm still on Andy Grimm's side. I'm still on his side. We've invited him on the show. He still may come on sometime, and I welcome him to come in here and talk about it.
Yeah, I welcome Andy on, talk about his side of the story, absolutely. And I'm just talking about, the stuff that came out here. Obviously, again, we have cautioning, Andy about his behavior. I think, whenever you're, I've only worked around police officers a few times, but, whenever I do, I try to make it known, although I don't do like this sort of, middle of the night, crime scene, tracking down the stuff photography. I don't think I've ever really done that. Everything I've shot has been during the day, usually in public, like at a protest or something where, it's like they can clearly see me. So I can't say I've ever been in his situation, but, I've always tried to make my interactions with police as friendly as possible, coming up to them, identifying myself as a photojournalist, showing them a press pass if I have one. But what about you, Bruce? What do you think of the Andy Grimm situation? Is this guy losing his any sort of credence he has because of this latest developments, or should we kind of still give him the benefit of the doubt?
Well, I've been to countries all over the world, and at 6'2", with a camera, walking into a situation, I affect that situation instantly, and I've learned that, and that's why I carry the M6. It looks like this. It looks like a tourist camera around, and I walk in. And when I get to where I want, I casually bring out my equipment and go. Otherwise, what's on the other side is going to freak out and disappear, and I'm not going to get the photo. So if you're going to, we got to get rid of the plumber and keep it the photographer walking into a cop scene. Put yourself in the cop's shoes. They're chasing down some guy that they haven't caught yet, and he's got an Uzi, and he's shooting up the other cops on the other side of the thing, and they don't know where he is. I think the last thing as a photographer I would do is make myself anywhere like a gun or anything. I mean, there's so many ways I could carry my tripod and approach the scene. So yeah, the cop shouldn't have shot him, but I think on the other side he shouldn't have come in giving him any idea. I mean, and that's why the cops wear these huge things that says police across their chest and across their back, so their buddies don't shoot them. You know, so why?
That still happens all the time.
Always has the press pass in his hat in the 40s. You know, it was everybody's wearing hats, and well, that one guy has got a press thing, so he's kind of allowed to come in, and when he brings his hands up, they kind of figure he's got a camera in his hand. But nowadays it's. Everybody's got an opinion, so it makes it really tough.
Yeah.
New York, there are so many weird things happen in a situation that you just got to really keep your eyes open, especially as a photographer.
Yeah.
We've got things underneath our jacket that we're pulling out of our jacket.
Yeah.
That's kind of like, come on, it's.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That would make anybody on edge. I think the difference being, at least as far as my time working in New York City, 99% of the time I was working during the day. So, it was hopefully clearly visible I was pulling out a camera. I usually had my press pass. I only had one time somebody a cop threatened to take away my press pass because I was shooting a movie scene, and I was, I wasn't moving along as quickly as they liked. But beyond that, no, never had any issues with or run-ins with the police. They pretty much told me to back off sometimes, a couple times, but that was about it. Zach, any thoughts on Mr. Grimm or this situation?
No. You're asking me if you think I have any thoughts on police shooting a journalist?
Here we go.
You see?
Here we go.
So,
rant
off the top of my head, the things the police have mistaken as a gun. Several cell phones, a Snickers bar, cameras, a wallet. Now a tripod, which I guess he thought that the guy thought he had a rocket launcher. I don't know what freaking kind of gun he thought he had. This excuse is really, it got old about. For me personally, it got old around Amadou Diallo.
I don't know what that is.
Not Amadou Diallo. Sorry, not Diallo. That was the plunger guy that the NYPD dealt with.
Are we talking about plumbers still? Come on, guys.
No, I was talking about the time that the plumbers attacked or the police attacked. No. So, this gets really old. Police are trained, or supposed to be trained, at least, to identify a weapon. They are trained around weapons. They know what guns look like. And a tripod does not look like a gun. It does not look like a gun unless you're expecting, a rocket launcher. Literally, we've had even our armed forces, if you watch Collateral Murder, bomb someone not bomb somebody, but use a 50 cal rifle on somebody from a helicopter because they thought a 70-200 Canon lens looked like a rocket launcher. So this is like a go-to response for law enforcement officers to respond to when they shoot somebody. If they have something in their hand, it looks like a gun. Like that's in Stephon Clark out in California. He had a cell phone, so that looked like a gun. Never mind the fact that he was shot 6 times in the back first. So they didn't even see the cell phone. They just shot the guy first. So, like, this is just a ridiculous idea in the first place, the premise of it. And then secondarily, this is what this guy's job is to do, is to come up on scenes and quickly get his camera out and start shooting and start videotaping. This is what his job is to do, and it's protected by the First Amendment. It literally is part of our Constitution, the Bill of Rights, for these people to be able to do this. And if the police are so terrified of this, I'm not quite sure what's going on in their neighborhood that they're so terrified that a second gunman is coming up, because this is also something that just statistically does not at all happen. Like, it doesn't happen. Even in New York City, which is always heightened scenarios, it doesn't happen. A second gunman doesn't come up. And I don't even believe was there a gun in the scenario at which in this arrest was happening. I mean, like, I don't know. As a person who's literally, I've been arrested, I've been beaten, I've been trampled by cops, all under the excuse of, like, getting out of the area, police, security zone, whatever excuse they want to pull up. Like, this is just doubling down as unbelievably freaking ridiculous that now they're trying to pull up. I mean, this is the Associated Press. Basically, I mean, this is also like one of those weird things where the media itself is so in bed with the police department where they're actually finding excuses for the police department to have shot one of their fellow members of the media, is that he has a problem coming up on scenes really quickly. I mean, it's just
so this
like,
is also, it's Ohio, it's not New York.
Yeah, it's also Ohio. I mean, never. So like, there's all these things. I mean, he's probably going to get a $75,000 payout or whatever pathetic amount of money he's looking for, because it's, to me, unbelievable. The cop, I'm sure, will keep his job and everything will go back to normal, because that's what happens. The members of the press are a lower quality of human being, according to the police departments across the United States, and that's how they're trained. We all know that, and that's the thing. I mean, the Department of Homeland Security is now currently talking about building a list of journalists. That's a thing that's happened, and that's happening right now. So, like, it's okay to shoot a police officer, or it's okay to shoot a member of the press, because you can find, or a black person, or a Hispanic person, or a white person, as long as they have something in their hands. And this is nothing new. So I guess that's my depressing rant, as usual.
That was a depressing rant with Zach Roberts.
Can we spin those out?
An Around the Lens exclusive.
Rants you want to drink
actually, to make you feel better, there's 44,000 cops in New York.
Yeah,
and there's probably 60,000 of, probably 2/3 of them have never pulled their gun out of their pocket. Out of those 44,000, there's got to be some bad guys. There's got to be some stupid guys. There's got to be some guys that don't stick to their training. I was at a funeral for the guy who died in Iraq. He was a fireman and a chopper pilot. And Air Force came in, and I was shooting the procession, and I came up upon 2 anti-terrorist riot cops. Yeah. They're the cops that the cops go to when they get in trouble.
Yeah.
And guess what we talked about?
What's that?
Photography.
Yeah.
The guy came up to me with all of his gear on, but and the two of them were standing at a V. They knew exactly what they were doing. They had their headphones on. They had everything that they needed. They were professionals.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, too many mistakes are happening, and too many of the bad guys are still just like the teacher at the school. How long did the teacher stay in school and screw up those kids? Yeah. I think nothing against the fact that the guy got shot, but I think it's just as bad what that teacher did, and the damn teacher gets away with it for years and years and years and years. So they're just some really badass people out there that are getting away with a lot of shit they shouldn't.
So one of the, I think I've told this story probably before. I was sitting I was at Ferguson, where literally kind of have the vague stench of tear gas and things like that on us, sitting at the bar, and a guy comes up, clearly military, has his haircut on. We're sitting and watching the scenes on CNN at the hotel bar of Ferguson and the stuff that we were covering the night before, and we, for some reason or another, I don't know how we started talking. I think I bought him a drink, and we started talking, and he had literally just come back from, I think it was Iraq. It was either Iraq or Afghanistan, obviously it would have been. And he was saying one of the worst things that's happening is that for police departments in America is that a whole bunch of soldiers are coming back and looking for work, and they're immediately going into law enforcement. And it's not that that's a bad thing in general, but they're never, and this is his words, not even my own thing, but I just agree with him, is that they're not getting retrained, is that they're immediately going in, and police departments go, well, this guy has been in downtown Baghdad on the back of a Humvee. I think we don't have to train him. And the problem is he said, my orders were, if I saw a kid, a 9-year-old, that I thought had a gun, I was okay shooting him first and moving on and hauling out away. That was what my orders were, and that's what we were supposed to do. And you can disagree with that or agree with that, whatever is ordered, whether that should be orders or not. But that's what a lot of law enforcement are trained to do. And there's a couple good documentaries out about it, but I've been to the NRA meetings where they talk about, they bring in law enforcement and they train law enforcement and talk to them about how to deal with the new big threats that's happening, whether it be Black Lives Matter or whatever. And so I know what the training is, and the training they're trying to push on local police departments is you're continually under threat. Everyone has a gun. You should continually be afraid of everybody, and you should treat them as if basically they're a combatant. Not your citizen, not your fellow citizen that you're protecting, but they're a potential combatant. And that's something that the NYPD has trained years ago. The memos came out years ago during Occupy Wall Street that claiming that kids at Occupy Wall Street had handguns and they had knives and they had all this stuff, which was complete bullcrap. Just completely and totally made up to terrify those cops so that the first response when anything went down, say at a protest or whatever, is pull out your clubs, pull out your pepper spray, pull out whatever you have, and put those kids down into submission. And as a person who was trampled by cops and was beaten while I was laying face down, I know firsthand that's true. But this is a really big problem. And since the media and since the press has to be in that first line, like one thing I always tell people at protest, like, yeah, protesters are always potentially going to get hit and cops are always going to get, except if you look at a media line, you look at a line where there's protesters and cops, who's the people in the middle? It's always guys with cameras. Like the reason why we carry helmets with us wherever we go, and bulletproof vests and gas masks is because we physically have to be where crap is going to go down. And so like police need to learn somehow that people with big press labels across the front of their chest and whatever aren't the threat. And aren't a threat and should be treated at least slightly differently than even the protester who also shouldn't be beaten. I mean, we just literally had in Israel, who again, NYPD goes to Israel to train on how to deal with protesters. This is a thing that happens. They just admitted to purposely shooting a photojournalist in the latest Gaza protests. The IDF admitted to this on their Twitter. I have the tweet if anybody wants it. They could question me, but it's terrifying of how quickly we've gotten this way. We've gone from local community police department to shoot first, ask questions later, use your baton questions, and that goes down to the point of even like, if you're an NYPD or if you're a New York photojournalist, you need to go through the New York Police Department to get a press credential. Like. That's completely insane to me. So, second round.
Indeed. I've never heard that argument before. Anyways,
really?
we're gonna move on to our final topic this evening because we're getting close to the end of the show. And I want to make sure I gave Zach the opportunity to speak.
One more chance to rant about something.
You know what? Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I'm reconsidering that. Anyways,
You want it, you can hold off on that story for another show if you want to, so that my voice doesn't go my throat doesn't go sore.
I think it's worth.
My rant.
Maybe we can kind of keep the rant level to a 3 instead of a 10. But anyways, it was recently revealed in September of 2010. This is a really old story, Zach.
It is an old story, but it's because because Martin Luther King story. Stories about Martin Luther King is it's the 50th anniversary of his assassination. And so the stories have come out basically, but this has kind of gone viral yet again. This story that the FBI had, among the many other people that the FBI had surrounding Martin Luther King and kind of giving informants. There's a lot of stories about other protesters and rumors about even people like Jesse Jackson and things like that being informants, which I personally don't believe. But that this photographer was this famous, well-respected photojournalist, we found out years later through, which I find also kind of sadly hilarious, through an accidental release from the FBI, accidentally released the informant's name. Which we would probably still not know it, but it was actually the FBI that leaked the name through basically they forgot to black out something in a form. Oh. But the fact that he was giving them information, and this is also notable because Ernest Withers, never mind being a trusted and great photojournalist, at least his pictures are great, also is an African American man. So it's also kind of sad that we had basically somebody spying on one of our greatest civil rights leaders in American history. And this is something that happens today. I mean, it's something that, as a person who covers civil rights movements a lot, I have to be so careful in who I talk to and who I work with and who I even tweet at this point for other activists to trust me because of things like this. And journalists are used quite a bit. Usually it's a fake journalist that they use, the FBI uses or whatever, and then they infiltrate using a name or something like that, like saying, oh, we work for the Guardian, and really you're an FBI agent. It's not usually a actual photojournalist that they use as an informant, but here we are. This is something that happened in our history.
Yeah. Any thoughts on this, guys? The fact that we had an informant here who was a trusted advisor, trusted someone Martin Luther King trusted to photograph him? Is this?
I would ask what people's thoughts are on if you found out that another trusted photojournalist that you knew, say, I don't want to besmirch his name, but say Tyler Hicks or something like that.
Dare you.
If you found out that he was an FBI agent. Well, I love Tyler Hicks. Don't. I just always know his name. And I don't believe he is.
You're first. Tyler Hicks is an FBI agent. Zach Roberts.
Don't even spread that rumor. But if you found out that he was an informant, wouldn't that? How would that make you feel? How would that make you trust about any of his work? I mean, his entire history. I mean, people would win Pulitzers. You later find out were actually informants. Anybody?
Unfortunately, there's a lot of people that were informants that we'll never find out about. So, it's happened all the way back to
Bruce,
Indian scouts being for the Americans, when we're fighting the Indians. I mean, it's kind of going back to, I'm sure it happened in Rome, but it's
Jesus.
It's way back when. Yeah, Jesus too, yeah?
Yeah, Jesus. Yeah.
So
Roman informant.
But that's where spies come in. I'm actually showing some apartments to some people that are actually spies. And they're so they're but it's just, what can you do? The stuff that we're finding out about the past is that, but do we take all of his work out of the museum because is it good work because of him, or is it good work because of the work? So, to say, oh, he was an informant, but oh, he also did great work. Maybe the fact that he was an informant got him into places that he could do his great work. So it was good that he was an informant. Hopefully he didn't do anything that got him in trouble. So
Well, that's the reason I watch the Cosby Show. Still my favorite show. You can't separate it. You know,
God.
The man's an artist. What are you gonna do?
Oh my God.
No, I mean it is so much like whether it be have how many sexual harassments, like is Louis C.K.'s stuff still really funny?
Yeah.
Right.
It's still funny. I think it's still funny. I think it still holds up, even though he's a pervert, to say the least.
Maybe it's because he's a pervert. Maybe it's.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of jokes that follow his work. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
There's a difference between laughing at an actor doing an acting because it's him or her, as opposed to a journalist. You could just find the photograph on the table and say, wow, this is an incredible photograph. And all of a sudden you find out the guy who took it's a pervert. Oh, I hate the photograph. No, I don't think that works. Yeah.
No, I think it's an interesting point. I mean, do you immediately discount all the work created by someone who has a besmirched sort of, has their name besmirched? Is, like I said, as all as Louis C.K. stuff, is all of Charlie Rose's interviews now not material that can be watched.
Unbelievably boring.
True.
As they always were.
Yeah. Who else? I mean, any of them, does their work still merit attention, even if you found out that, they maybe had a dubious background? And I don't know. I think that's up to the individual person, really, how they choose to interpret. I mean, maybe there's I can tell you for sure that if you're someone who was affected by, someone who did something with, some of these folks who, did some horrible stuff sexually, I think it's probably tough for anyone, some of the people affected by that to even watch their stuff. So yeah, it does discount their stuff. I mean, it does. So it's definitely up to the individual person. It's almost like I relate it to, like PTSD in a sense that where that affects you, it may not affect you, Zach, or you, Ron, you may be able to watch the Cosby Show, but I got to imagine that the folks that were affected by Cosby can't watch the Cosby Show, so it does affect their work, But yeah, it's interesting call.
If for me, for like things like Cosby, using for example, or if it's something that directly relates to, for like Louis C.K., it doesn't affect his work as much as it does for me for Cosby. Never mind the fact that what Cosby did is 100 times worse than what Louis C.K. did. So I mean, like there is a scale there that you have to start to consider somewhat, or at least as a guy I can consider.
Right.
But the fact that he's a family man, the fact that his entire comedy, his entire life is based around. Basically, I mean, he spent a lot of time. If you look at his comments on other comedians that went blue, Richard Pryor and things like that, and like he always looked down on those people and always talked down on those people. So for me, Cosby's like legacy, and this it pains me to say because I love the Cosby Show. I grew up on the Cosby Show. Is completely destroyed.
Yeah.
And kind of almost in the same way, say, even though it's not a sexual harassment thing, Dennis Miller, who went from not lefty per se, but a libertarian kind of leftiness comedy. His old stuff was really good. And then he went, after 9/11, he like lost his mind.
Yeah.
He didn't even just go Republican. He went like somewhere off in the distance, somewhere not to be seen. And I have to say, like, I can't look at his comedy there. So like, it's all on a scale. So, I mean, it's interesting because if he was a writer, if Ernest Withers was a writer who was writing about it and contextualizing things, I think I would have, it would be harder for me to say that him being an FBI informer didn't affect my view of his work as opposed to a photojournalist, which to me is always a paradigm that has to be considered when the difference between photojournalists and print journalists, and when whatever happens or whatever, what's the difference between their work, if you see where I'm going with that.
So if some guy lies to get into a sweatshop, goes in there and does a whole incredible series, and he literally lied his way to get in there, didn't tell anybody what he's doing, and is that any different than a spy connecting with?
If he was working for the company and working as a spy to out anybody who worked at the work, any whistleblower, trying to out whistleblowers within the sweatshop, then yeah, I mean, that's what Ernest Withers was doing, though, is that he worked his way into the core, the entire core of the civil rights movement, Martin Luther King, and this literally he could have given them information that could have broken important protests. If Martin Luther King had said something offhand about his about one of his affairs or something like that, and had got that, say, on audio tape or something. I mean, obviously, due to technology in the past, he couldn't do that as easily. But like in the same scenario, like I could have my cell phone out and record a conversation where some big activist has Edward Hogg or David Hogg skipped school one day, and he outed that he's one of the March for Our Lives kids. And I gave that to the FBI, and I got that information because I was a trusted journalist, and I used that information as my in. Then yeah, that's a huge thing, not only for the movement and for whatever, because it's something they can use against it. I mean, the FBI at this time period too, when Ernest Withers was doing that, was using unbelievable smear tactics against Martin Luther King and the entire civil rights movement. Down to, I mean, they were sending King death threats. They were literally not only threatening his life, but trying to convince him to commit suicide. So I mean, like, this isn't, I think that I've talked my way into and tricked my way into saying trying to convince people that I was a conservative journalist or something like that to cover things before as a journalist, but I wasn't giving that information to like a law enforcement agency, especially a law enforcement agency that was like the FBI was in the 50s and 60s, which, like, the fact that almost top to bottom that organization shouldn't be tried for I don't know what sort of crimes is beyond me. I mean, J. Edgar Hoover was a monster, to say the least, of American history. So I mean, I don't know. I can see where you're going with the parallel, but I don't see the parallel of using basically and convincing your way into something, whether it be a conference or something like that, which I've done a ton of times, or and then giving that information as a journalist to a newspaper or giving that information to the FBI is dramatically different.
Yeah. And then he got himself into that and got himself a situation where he could create incredible images. So it would be interesting to see what he actually knew and didn't tell the FBI, because that would have outed his position to being able to take the photographs.
It's sad. It is really sad that we only find this out. I believe I believe it would have been after his death, right? Is because it would be very interesting again, because the other thing that's crazy is that he literally could have been giving them false information. Right. He literally been saying, oh, it looks like only 5 people are going to show up this protest. Don't even bother sending FBI agents to it. And then they go and there's 50,000 people at the March on Washington or whatever. He could have literally been an informant. I'm working on a project right now with an FBI informant. He wrote a book called The Blood of Patriots about it. So it's like I know how easy it would be to give them false information, but it's especially in something like this, because I can't imagine that he was like giving them audio tapes or something like that, because trying to hide an audio recorder back in 1955 or 1965 was a little bit more difficult than nowadays.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Well, I guess how would I react if I found out somebody if Zach was an informant for the FBI? I would probably be shocked and amazed. But in the end, I probably would have expected it. It's like it's always the person you least expect. Anyways, we are at the end of our show. It's been a great show so far, and let's close it up with some suggestions or plugs or whatever you want. Bruce, what do you want us to check out?
Well, check out Camera Odysseys. It's we're taking photographers around the world. It's travel like a journalist, live like a native, shoot like a professional.
I like it.
And the trips that we've been on is really amazing, because I literally take the visitor as if they were photographers, and we go out and we seek seek what we can photograph. And I've got a great trip coming up in October to Nepal and Bhutan, which is just amazing. And then I've got all season next from December to May in Cuba. So if you want to see the real Cuba, not just the fancy old cars, look us up. It's incredible. And if you want one of my books, streetmoments.com.
Very good book. I'll be writing a little review of it on the site, so be sure to check that out. And hopefully you can get into Cuba. Hopefully there's no changes in laws that prevent you from doing that. Although I know there are ways into Cuba if you go.
I go to JFK, hop on the airplane, and land in Havana, and walk right in. For the last 10 years.
Hey, Bruce, are you a Cuban?
Informant?
I was trying to remember what their equivalent of the like KGB or FBI was, and I couldn't remember. So, are you using sound? What was it? They were using like sound blasting at the end,
yeah.
Supposedly. Even though that was been proven now, that's been proven as crap.
What'd you say?
So, I can't hear anything anymore.
That
Ron,
was 25 people, and they haven't figured that one out yet.
Yeah, that's amazing. That story.
Ron, you want us to go to anything or News Eagle 25?
I want you to watch Around the Lens every Monday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on Facebook.com/ATL Podcast.
Good plug. That's a great plug. Thank you.
Thank you.
Zach, anything from you?
I am going to plug, I don't know how I can direct you to it, but St. Baldrick's. I'm actually photographing the Litvitz, Pennsylvania, St. Baldrick's fundraiser. It's the fundraiser where people fundraise money to basically shave their head. For cancer research, and a friend of mine's doing it. It's going to be hilarious how she looks afterwards. But I'm the volunteer photographer to do it for the nonprofit there, and I'm super excited to do it. So go to stbaldricks.org, and I guess you can search Litvitz or just donate to that fund in general. I think we can all kind of agree, even the FBI informants among us, that conquering childhood cancer is probably a good thing to fight against.
Excellent.
I've photographed 4 of those.
Oh, fun.
And they're incredible.
Yeah. I'm actually I'm actually more nervous about photographing this than like the last like white supremacist rally I went to, just because I'm like, it's almost like it's the reason I don't shoot weddings is I'm like, no, there's like, you only get one chance at that photo. Yep. Then the hair is cut and it's on the floor.
I see a website here, stbaldricks.org/head-shaving.
Yes, that's probably it. Yeah.
Well, just one little real quick thing. There was a little boy at this organization, and the police station down the road here, number 9, come and they shave their heads every year. The entire police station and the mounted cops in the park. And the little boy had a full head of hair, and the mom was there. And all the cops, the reason they shave their head is so that they can be like their heroes.
Yeah.
And so the little boy had hair and came up to his mom and said, "I want my hair shaved off." And mom said, "Why?" Because that meant cancer treatment.
Yeah.
And he says he looked at the cops, and there must have been 15 of them there. The place was full of people, and he says, "Because I want to look just like my heroes."
Oh, yeah.
And the whole place just went real bad. It was amazing. And the mom just cried and she let him do it, and they shaved his head.
Wow.
So
I would do it, but I look horrible with a shaved head. Like really bad with a shaved head. Otherwise, I would do it in a second. Also, covering white supremacy, it's really not a good idea to have a shaved head. And being white and blonde-eyed, not like...
Oh,
I
you
would
blend right in.
Really
They'd really accept you then, Jack.
Yeah.
All right.
I don't like that much.
I want to thank everybody for listening, especially those informants who are listening. Please inform your friends about the show. I also want to say a big shout out to Jerry over at the NSA who listens to everything I do. Thank you. Also, thank you for backing up all my stuff. I really appreciate that. Always good to get backup from the NSA whenever I need it. But that being said, the only thing I'm going to plug, and this is going to be a little preview for next week, the Pocket Cinema Camera 4K is a new Blackmagic camera. It's coming out here, and it's very intriguing. Go check it out. See what you think about it, and we'll talk about it next week. But I think it's it could be a game changer with regard to shooting 4K video. Anyways, that has been our episode for the week. I want to thank our guest, Bruce, for making an appearance. I want to not thank Ron for having the sound on while police can stop. Ron, can you please mute your mic?
The FBI are coming
for
Ron right now.
Jeez.
They've already got the Stormy Daniel papers from the offices of the FBI, and they're coming for Ron.
just want to do my outro.
They're bringing them in.
Anyways, do want to thank our guest, Bruce Byers, coming in at the last minute here. Thank you for coming on the show. Truly appreciate it. Always welcome. And for Zach Roberts and Ron Hamilton, I am David J. Murphy. This has been Around the Lens, episode 119, and we are out.